right out of this. I'm live right now.
Good afternoon, Trust, for allowing us to be part of this amazing event today. Adams was a good paying job for the Irish. Al, who's the executive director of Fort Adams Trust. Thank you.
I'm Paul Marshall, the executive director of Fort Adams. Begin some thank yous and revitalize historic Fort Adams for the public's benefit. It's after their 30th anniversary this year. 30 years of commemorative commemoration of our 250 years of American independence. Years to build. It was built commemoration of our 250 years of American independence. Years to build. It was built stone by stone, arch from the founding of our nation to the very unglamorous labor. Arch from the founding of our nation to the very unglamorous labor of defending it. The very unglamorous labor of defending it. Center of it. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker.
Wanting to celebrate both the disclosure. My name's McBurney. My name's McBurney. You might guess that's Scotch. Of course, we're Irish, who were mostly very poor tenant farmers. There's Fort Adams. The economy was viewed as a fixed pie. Consider some of the types of laws that Britain imposed to make send the raw wool. But if American Ireland had in common that they were colonies of Great Britain, middle class yeoman farmer, netting about. He lived in Maryland. During the length of a great British house, very wealthy, not really compared to the English. That Wentworth Woodhouse in England, Town, beautiful house, definitely one of the best in its day, but wealthy house, definitely one of the best in its day, but wealthy aristocrats, they didn't have a large poor population, and merchants were doing great. They might have hadn't have a large poor population, and merchants were doing great. they might have had the highest average income in the world, that about 2/3 of Rhode Island men could. I do think that an underlying cause of the American Revolution was that Americans were ready, economic Catholic population. Most Irish Catholics lived lives of 70. Virtually no Irishman owned any land. In 1772, during a tour of Ireland, one of the few ones that survived the Irish, it was decided to let it. One of the few ones that survived the Irish, it was decided to let it stand. That was the established church in Ireland. Many were also tentative men pushing out the Indians who. Many were also tentative men pushing out the Indians who owned the land. Immigrants who owned the land. Immigrants who wanted to settle beyond the Appalachian Mountains to buy cheap land for the. Who wanted to settle beyond the Appalachian Mountains to buy cheap land for the deaths of his brothers during the war. Brothers during the war. He got 18th century, but to no avail. 18th century, but to no avail. But to no avail. Its economy was migration were turned into a tidal wave as a result of the. Its economy was migration were turned into a tidal wave as a result of the Great Famine that racked Ireland from the. Maryland enacted a plethora of anti-Catholic. 91 wrote, the Irish in America, with a few exceptions, wrote, the Irish in America, with a few exceptions, were attached to. Were volunteered to fight, but after a very the 9th Regiment were volunteered to fight. But after a very the 9th Regiment of Continentals. Here, Thomas Denison, Providence. So this is just www fold 3. You click on American Revolution 2. William Kelly served in Captain Thomas Allen's company, 1777, and the second just has that it's on file with. And the second just has that it's on file with the National Archives. Rhode Island Regiment with the National Archives. Rhode Island regiments almost the entire war. He participated in Island regiments almost the entire war. He participated in the. He was a grandson of the entire war. He participated in the. He was a grandson of Irish immigrants. He was a grandson of Irish immigrants from County Derry, Northern Ireland. Irish immigrants from County Derry, Northern Ireland, and before the war operated a bookstore. And before the war operated a bookstore in Boston. Native of Wicklow in Boston. Native of Wicklow, Ireland, and came to Moylan, Ireland, and came to Moylan was born in Cork and moved to Philadelphia. In a letter written in January 1776, Philadelphia. In a letter written in January 1776, you will recall that the family in County Derry. His mother had died before his family immigrated. Printed onto a broadside. A broadside was a one-sheet piece of paper like this one. It could be variation. Thompson also kept the minutes of the Continental Congress. It could be variation. Thompson also kept the minutes of the Continental Congress, which are invaluable. 8, 1776, with a fleet of 71 ships and 70 valuable. 8, 1776, with a fleet of 71 ships and 7,100 soldiers. The British had 2 attempts to oust the British from Newport, but neither was successful. The problem was that would mean war with Britain. Arrive in North America in mid-1778 with a major naval. I have a few copies here. The Rhode Island briefly, but then you read the diaries phonetically. Piggott. So you know about this guy. He destroyed shipping that could have been used to transport American troops. More time in a dank prison and prison command. That was the path. When that army was defeated at the Battle of Limerick in 1691, Limerick, before the battle, was lost and had a son. The couple then emigrated to a frontier town in New Hampshire. Master became a school teacher. And then they moved to Berwick, Maine, which was also a frontier than most other boys in the frontier. You see kind of a common phrase about successful generals. They somehow got good educations, or successful Irish people in North America at this time. Master Sullivan had undoubtedly been raised as a Roman Catholic, but as an Irish to New England that was then very anti-Catholic, he and his family lost touch with their Roman Catholic roots, and this was not uncommon for Irish colonial times. Meanwhile, he thrived. He trained to become a lawyer. He married Lydia Renwick Worcester of Kittery, Maine in 1760. The couple moved to a house and 3 acres in Durham, New Hampshire. He became very active in representing creditors. It must not have been fun, but he overcame this and became a successful lawyer. He also led a local militia outfit. As a break, Sullivan came to the attention of patriots. He was selected as 75, but by late 1774, a group of Rhode Islanders in Newport stormed Fort Island, said it owned. Patriots. And this bold act by Rhode Islanders inspired 2 similar raids and ammunition, other supplies. At the Battle of Lexington and Concord, New England was known by them, and in June 1775, a remarkable victory at Trenton, the morning after of Long Island on August 27, 1776, and had been captured. Even was a good general, but he also recognized that he had a Washington strongly advised Sullivan to maintain good relations with the New not be necessarily easy because the French had been the historic enemy. And New England were allies. France also had created a large fleet under Charles Henri Theodat. His fleet had sailed. The arrival of D'Estaing's squadrons spread panic. The American army was far from ready. He had to wait for Washington to send him reinforcements. This would all take time. Or blew up 6 frigates, each carrying from 28 to 32 guns. Ships into Newport Harbor and tried to save them, but they where they were along the coast. They were no match for the Royal French fleet. The tops of masts protruding above the water's surface in Newport Harbor. Previously to Australia and New Zealand from 1776, Marine Archaeology Project reported Sullivan and D'Estaing meet to make plans. How would Sullivan and D'Estaing get along? The 2 men were different. D'Estaing was born into immense privilege into the French aristocracy. The wealthiest men of France. He was a commander of a large expeditionary force from one of the most powerful empire, and he was a general in the new Continental Army who commanded. Yet Sullivan immediately acted as D'Estaing's equal and even issued orders to him. Proud and could be haughty. Sullivan was proud and could be thin-skinned. Here's a beautiful map that the French engineers did. And I held this at the Library of Congress, and the librarian said, "Be careful, that's worth about $3 million. So, on the day of the attack, the Americans, the plan was D'Estaing's ships would run the Newport Harbor, the Aquidneck Island, and the idea was forces would then link up and would trap some British forces that were at the northern part of Aquidneck Island. Next, they would move south toward Pigot's defensive fortifications outside. But D'Estaing was frustrated by the American delays. The Americans were taking too long, with 3 states raising their own troops using drafts. On August 8th, a day early, D'Estaing decided to sail his ships north up the main channel. He successfully forced his way past 3 blazing artillery batteries surrounding Newport. And one of them was right here at this. So it would have been, it's called a Brenton artillery post, and it would have been firing, British cannon would have been firing at the French. The fleet ran past the batteries and anchored near. Close up, you can see Brenton Island there where Fort Adams is, and the line of fire of the artillery. But this was a day ahead of schedule. After D'Estaing forced his way past Newport, the British troops at the northern part of Aquidneck Island repeated to land at the same time in Aquidneck Island and trap some. The next day, 4,000 armed Frenchmen were landed. they were finally preparing to ship their troops. Sullivan ordered his recently arrived Continentals and other American troops to cross over the Navy, come to rescue the Newport garrison. Shocked, D'Estaing than the French, but he only had one. Howe decided to stay put and just disrupt the siege. He had to decide what to do. Should he sail out and challenge Howe, or that D'Estaing should have decided to stay for a few more days to see if he could D'Estaing to sail out to challenge Howe, which he ultimately decided to do. His ships. So here are the ships leaving, and you can see French ships are firing, the British are firing. A great sea battle from here, ready to see a major sea engagement. So if you'd been in Newport civilian at the time, you would have been right over here at the cliffs from the threat of capture. This maneuvered for a battle, a terrible storm, probably a hurricane. Learned later that it went to Boston. 3 ships were damaged in battles. Here's a great drawing by a French engineer, Pierre, of the ship. But then at night fell, and the attack stopped, defensive fortifications, and pounding them with cannon. At first, Sullivan had some successes, as Piggott ordered his front. Here's a print that I own. It's one of 2 colorized Continental Army, and some of its top officers, including Rhode Island's own Massachusetts. D'Estaing's ships arrived off of Newport. It seems it was the best choice. The big event of the Rhode Island campaign was the when they please and leave General Sullivan when they. The American militiamen knew that their best hope was to have the French. So they showed some good common sense. That glory had been dashed. He made them above the fray. Sullivan insulted the French ally. Else maintained good relations above the fray. Sullivan insulted the French ally. Else maintained good relations with the French. Sullivan regained with the French. Sullivan regained his senses, retracted his public order. His senses, retracted his public order, and thanked the French. So I recommend that all of you here and thank the French. So I recommend that all of you here apply that rule when it comes to a family disagreement. Apply that rule when it comes to family disagreements. So to retreat on the night. So to retreat on the night of August 28th to the northern Portsmouth. Of August 28th to the northern Portsmouth. He planned to wait to see if the French would return to help. Piggott saw that the Americans had disappeared, and he decided to attack, hoping to catch the American fortifications in the line of defense at Butts Hill. In between, Sullivan to tire out the British, have some engagements, and by the time they got up to the main fortification. On the East Road at the intersection of what is now Union of Massachusetts State Troops and Rhode Islanders, a stone wall ambushed the British 22nd Regiment. Here's a map of that. This was one of the best American ambushes of the entire war. Advanced troops also put up a strong resistance to the north at Quaker Hill, but the American advanced troops were overwhelmed by the oncoming British. So they retreated to the main American line on the east side of the island, commanded by Brigadier General John Glover of Marblehead, Massachusetts. Piggott's soldiers marched up to the defensive positions, and seeing the American troops remain firm behind stone walls and regardless of Bunker Hill, Piggott ordered his troops to halt. So that ended the action on the east side. Led by Lieutenant Colonel John Lawrence of South Carolina, engaged in a delaying action, but again the more numerous German and Loyalist troops continued up the road, driving Lawrence back. Then the attackers arrived at the American defenses consisting of 5 regiments, most stationed behind stone walls. The outer redoubt was held by the 2nd Rhode Island Regiment of Continentals, and next to it, supporting them behind stone wall, stood the famed 1st Rhode Island Regiment of Continentals. Black men who had obtained their freedom by enlisting in the regiment for the duration of the regiment also had free men of colors, blacks, Indians, mostly Narragansetts, coming out in November. Despite the fact that for those recently emancipated, and here's Nathaniel Greene, but Sullivan disagreed. At this point, the French fleet with General Clinton could try to trap him on Aquidneck Island. Sullivan refused against British, German, and Loyalist regulars, and the British Army suffered troops marching to the shores. They tried to do something together, didn't succeed. Also, fierce competition over food between D'Estaing's 6,000 sailors. When two French officers tried to break up the fight, both were clubbed senseless, and one of them to erect a memorial to the fallen officer. Memorial until 1917. That's when France and Freedom Trail next to King's Chapel. Arrived in France, General John Pershing memorably said, "He did a good job in terms of military strategy and tactics. He had the British on their quickly retreat off the island at Howland. Did an effective job handling the American troops at the Battle of Rhode Island. He wisely did not engage in exchange a month later." America's new allies, the French. The French under the Comte de Rochefort and cooperated nicely. The Allies the next year would win America's independence at Yorktown, landing at Long Wharf in Newport. The French occupation of Newport for a year from on the practice of the Catholic religion as well. The first Mass celebrated troops and appreciated their helping America win its independence. Washington replied to a letter on March 12, 17, congratulating him on his re-election as the first president of most nations in examples of justice and liberality. This was 5 months before his fiction to persecution, no assistance. Mid-1820s, and as Rhode Island's first full-time resident priest. In 1828, there were only 600 or so Irish Catholics in Newport. More came and began to work in the state's 50,000. 3 out of every 8 Rhode Islanders were of Irish stock. Much. Sure.
48, downtown Newport.
Great to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.